As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous people of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions towards decolonization. We acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that was never meant to be owned. We recognize that most of the land that was entrusted to indigenous people was in some cases shared by choice, but all too often taken by force. We recognize that the historical colonialism and the ongoing colonialism that has led to the present day situation where land acknowledgements are often in place of land. As people of African descent, many of us have come here by choice, while many are here as a result of historical force. We acknowledge the complexities where we were promised land that was never given by those whose it never was to give. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to Indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor the dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. My name's Nicole. I'm the architect of BLAXPO. I just want to, again, personally welcome you here today. I want to thank you for your support, your encouragement. Just by being here shows the need, shows that we are deserving, shows that we belong. I want you guys to be reminded as you guys navigate that room of exhibitors and sponsors, do not be intimidated. You are overqualified for any position that they might have in store for you. So know that you're in the driving seat and that you can own all of the leads, all of the opportunities. We also welcome feedback. So any feedback that you have for us, please leave a testimonial, write us an email. We want to serve you. We understand that our Blackness is not a monolith, so we can't think of it all. So please give us feedback. And if you're looking to join our dynamic team, send us an email as well, because we're always looking to grow and expand. Thanks to you, I have no choice. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce two incredible women that have humbly and selflessly, just want to gather my thoughts because I've been following these two women for a long time, and the fact that they're here on our stage is just overwhelming. And I know that today you guys are going to all leave a little bit more empowered. Not the idea of chip on our shoulder, but how we can actively work towards owning the spaces that we're in. So Kike and Dori, thank you, and take it away.
Thank you. Test. Good morning, BLAXPO. I am really excited to be here. And I just want to hold up Nicole Antoine for being a visionary in our community. And we know that it's the sky's the limit from here, and may BLAXPO be here today and forevermore. So cheers to you and the entire BLAXPO team. We're all really grateful. Yeah, and I just want to introduce myself. I'm Kike Ojo-Thompson, and I'm the CEO and founder of Kojo Institute. We are here today happily and excitedly. We've got a little booth over in the other room, and we invite you to check us out and look into what we've got going on and some of our offerings that you might be able to bring into your organization in terms of learning, coaching, and organizational and system change for equity. And Dean Dori and I always call her Dean Dori because that's how I met her. Oh, I forgot to say one thing. I use the pronouns she and her, so if you see me later, we can chit chat. But Dr. Dori, who was always Dr. Dori, but we used to call her Dean Dori. Welcome home.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I say welcome home? Welcome, welcome
Thank
back
you.
to Toronto. We missed you. You left us, and you didn't ask us our permission. But we're just so happy that you agreed to come back today and to celebrate the publishing of this phenomenal book, Decolonizing Design. And if you haven't gotten yourself a copy, you can check out a different book list. We're also promoting Black business in here, right? Check out a different book list if you're from Toronto. If not, you can grab it online. But this thing is phenomenal. So
Thank you.
welcome. Do you want to say a few words?
Of hello. Just good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be home. And then I know it's going to embarrass her, but I just want to give a shout out to Anna Aggie, who is the amazing illustrator for the book. And so if you've been totally amazed by the amazing artistry, even though she's a little shy, I do recommend coming up to her. Or if you do, more importantly, if you want to hire her to do some amazing illustration, then, she's the one. So again, I'm excited to talk to you, especially because, I am because you are, right? So I do hope we get to talk about setting the foundation, right? And I think so, the relationship with you was really setting the foundation for all of the work that we were able to do at OCAD in terms of beginning to crack at, colonization and decolonize. So I do hope we get to talk about that as well.
Well,
right?
why don't we start there? I mean, so part of the reason that I'm tripping over saying Dr. Dori is because when I met Dori, she was the Dean of Design at OCAD-U, Ontario College of Art and Design University, here in Toronto, and was, first of all, the most important thing about that is that Dori is the first ever Black Dean of Design on the planet. So, and so
but not the last.
But not the last. But thank you for blazing a trail. And so when I met you, you were Dean Dori, and so forgive me. But Dr. Dori, maybe you could talk a little bit about the work that you were doing at OCAD-U and how we met, or what Kojo Institute I did.
Well, so we met kind of in two contexts, right? So the first context was just trying to level set, right, with a language to talk about this is not even decolonization. Can we talk about what is diversity? What is equity? What is inclusion? And so having you come and do that level set so that we could have conversations, that we can say, this is what equity looks like, and we're not doing that, and people know what you mean by the term equity, right? So, and people, I think, people forget how basic you have to be, right? And how much people just struggle with terminology. What does this mean? What does this mean to me? So people, especially institutions, the first thing is level setting. And so having you come and it has to be done by an outsider. Because I try to have the conversation and it doesn't work. First there's the power structure. So I'm a new dean, first Black dean. Nobody knows what the heck that looks like or what that experience would be. So I couldn't have that conversation because it feels punitive, right? So having you come in and facilitate that conversation, having you come in, work in some cases 101 with important leaders, to get their mindset around it, which again, something I couldn't do. I couldn't go to my boss and be like, this is how you do it, right? So people don't always talk about how important it is to have someone to lay the foundation, and oftentimes it's someone who can't be part of the organization in and of itself to do that work. So I am so grateful for your ability and willingness to have those conversations that I couldn't even have, right? Even if I wanted to have, I wouldn't have been effective in being able to have those conversations. So that's where it actually starts. But also the second part of it, which for me was the surprise where, because we brought you in to do some training for the Black Youth Design Initiative. So working with students and faculty and alumni. And that was a big epiphany for me because, again, being African American, we are steeped in a notion of blackness that like day one, here's the bottle, feed on that. So actually, to have students who are coming from Africa, coming from, in some ways, the Caribbean even, which for me was a surprise, and like kind of have like, here's Canadian racism 101. This is what you need to understand about you are not crazy for what you're experiencing, like the barriers that you are facing. That's, let me explain to you what that is. So level setting that work so that they could be able to do the work to connect with community. Like that was something that was, again, completely unexpected for me. But I was so grateful to have you facilitate that conversation. First, in terms of the healing it brought for them to understand that why they were struggling so much with the institution, struggling so much with the city that they were in, and feeling that sense of like perpetually being gaslit by all of your experiences. But also, like I said, the preparation for them to do the work, how to be in community. You can't be helping younger people to understand the structures of racism if you're not understanding how it operates itself, right?
Huge. Yes. Yeah, we appreciate all of that sort of history. And I think, I mean, you're sort of speaking to what I think is the purpose of this particular chat, this particular podcast and conversation in the context of, really younger Black people in the work environment, in the work world, Canadian. I think if you don't come out of a specification in terms of your education and your work life, that is sociology or some kind of social system analysis, and you are in tech or you are in business or you are in whatever manufacturing, and you just enter into the work world, where are you having these conversations about identity and about what it means to be Black in institution, and to do that well and thrive in that, as opposed to just barely make it or just survive or be insignificant, right? How do we make our identities significant and helpful and protective for us in work? And so for me, this is so much part of what you're saying. But And I think, your point about African Americans sort of having a particular knowledge and understanding from very young, and sort of observing Black Canadians or African descent Canadians who are everything from all over the entire continent of Africa to the Caribbean to 500 years Canadian and before that Africa kind of thing, right? So we've got multiple stories that define us. And the colonial project, getting back to this word colonization, the colonial project and its operation in Canada has had a particular impact on us as African descent people in Canada. And that's what you observed, right? It's a bit of what you observed that day. But, one of the things that you take up in the book, and I'm just gonna swing us into the book, into this conversation. But, one of the things you talk about is your identity as you define yourself as an African American, cisgender woman. And you talk a bit about what impact that has had. And maybe we can open by you kind of sharing that, since we've just been talking about this juxtaposition between the African Canadian experience and the African American, but about you.
Yeah, I mean, so again, this is, the confusing thing, and why terms like, Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality is so important, is sometimes you don't know why you're getting the heat that you're getting. Right, so is it because my gender? Is it because my race? Also, I got it, I have a little neurodiversity as well, right? So I actually don't think the way other people think, which, again, is useful. And so I get away with it because it's useful, but it does create also this other dimension of not belonging, right? Not quite belonging. So it impacts in multiple ways. One of the things I talk about in the book is like being a super token. And super token, by definition, is a person or whose talents are so great that the institution is willing to kind of put aside its aversion to their identities in order to have access to those talents, right? Mm-hmm. And so in almost all of the places that I've worked at, there's a certain point in which I've been bullied. Yeah, I think actually every place I've worked at, there's a point in which I get bullied. And part of it is that, so again, institution wants the talent. And my particular talent, I was like, I'm really smart at pattern recognition, which means it can feel like I can see the future. And so in a lot of places where they're like, oh, we're trying to get an edge on the future of possibilities. And they're like, oh, let's get Dori to do that because she can possibly see it, right, in a way, and ground it in kind of data and behavior in a way that makes us feel like this is a good place to go, right? So that's the talent. And I have to own that talent because a lot of times they don't want to give you credit for it. But there's always that edge where it's like, oh, you're a little too smart for a Black girl, right? You need to be more humble, you need to be more feminine, you need to be more something else that I can never be. Or the opposite side of it, right, is I like, but you're not really Black, right? Because Black people aren't that smart and talented, so you're some aberration of Blackness, right? So you catch it kind of on both sides, right? So it's meant, it's meant that every place I work, and then probably, my therapist says that this may or may not be a good thing, right? It's like my relationship is instrumental. What do I need to learn from myself? How do I need to grow through this experience? And part of what we were talking a little bit earlier, and the transformative aspect of it is that then, and how do I make this place safer for those who are going to follow in my wake, right? Because again, every experience I have, I've been bullied. So my thing is to say, can I set up structures, institutions, use all my talents and skills and networks and whatever to create transformative processes within every place that I work so people don't experience the things that I've been experiencing. And so if anyone, is at OK University, and they're feeling that things this is a little bit better, then I've done my job. But it's putting yourselves, right, putting your body in front, being authentic, right? So the other aspect of it is that, like, I've never attempted to assimilate, and that's why I get bullied, right? Because I never attempt to assimilate. I was like, you want my talent, it comes in this body, it comes with these ideas, so that's the trade-off, right? You have to accept me, right, in order for you to have access to what I can bring for you. But understand, and my understanding of this is like, this is not my home, right? I'm here to do a job, and my job is not to get paid or bring accolades to myself, although those are, I have to survive, so those things are helpful. My purpose is to make sure that when I leave this place, it is not the way in which I entered it.
Thank you for that, first of all. And I'm so curious, any super tokens in the room? Anybody ever experienced
come on, yeah.
I mean, in your book, you talk about Obama as a super token. And when I was like, I've been a super token, ooh, me and Obama have something in common. Cool. Just saying.
I want the real, and this is the thing where it's like, I want the real Obama book where he's like, every single day was just the whole world coming after me, right? And he hasn't written that book yet.
Not yet. But, so speaking of that life, right, and being inside and taking on decolonization as a task. And so I'm going to get to the, what do we mean by decolonization shortly, but, you talk in the book about the pain of doing the work and the need for the institution to protect and, to provide guidance and protection. And I think this is also, a part of the relevance to you all here and to those of you, shout out to the people listening on the podcast, not in person with us. But this is the thing, right, that is relevant to all of us as we walk our path in institutions is what do you need, right, to be well? And so maybe, Dori, you could talk a little bit about what guidance and protection you could have used in whatever work environment, just to provide some examples for folks.
Well, and I think it's important to, so I would say I didn't have guidance because one of the things of being the first is that you are the path breaker. So all I knew is that I just needed to be as authentic to who I was as possible, knowing that the institution, and again, there's like everything you can imagine to like, why do you have a social media presence? Like that was a threat. Why do you dress this way? Like, why do you have dean drag? And you're telling people what you're wearing every day. Like, that's not part of what it means to be a dean. That's not part of what you supposed, that's not your job, right? We won't even talk about tone policing. There was tons of tone policing every single day, right? So there wasn't guidance. And part of, I think, writing the book was to say, okay, so what is it, how would I want it to be guided, right? Is I wanted to understand how the systems work, right? So I'm coming in newly fresh. And again, people are kind of helping me, but again, they don't know either. Right. So again, I had Lily and Alan, I had all these amazing people who were there at the institution, but they don't know what it means to be in those decanal meetings, right? So guidance was not possible, but I did have support. And I wouldn't have been able to do what I did if I didn't have support. And, so again, Lillian was, the person who, like, she was one of the very few people who were like, Dori, what's going on in your soul? Right. That's like, she wouldn't ask it directly that way, but I knew what she was asking is what's going on in your soul, right? Checking in on me, right? Amanda in the Office of Diversity and Equity, like she took so much heat away from me to explain to people that wouldn't come to me what it is that she's doing, which is the job that the university asked me to do. And I think that's an important part, right, is that the university said, we want someone who can help us with decolonization and indigenous revitalization. And I got the job because I had done some of that work in Australia with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, right? So it's like, this is what you asked for. This is what it looks like. So I had support, and I remember particularly in my second year where the provost, who was my boss, was saying, Dori, you're taking too much heat. So what we're gonna do is all the things you're trying to say, let me say them. And I had actually have a little talk with my ego and be like, okay, this is about the struggle. This is about the struggle. So, okay, I will sit back and I will hear other people say the words that I've given them, the processes that I've explained to them, because it can't be effective if it's coming from me, right? And so that was really important, like in the second year, because it gave me enough respite, right? Enough rest so that I could come back stronger in my third year. And, by my fourth year, all of these things were in place to begin to dismantle things, right? And if there was a point where I wasn't sure I was going to make it actually out of my second year. So I have support, but guidance is trickier when you're a path breaker, because again, and this is the difference, maybe, like, you know, like I'm not Christopher Columbusing, right? It's not like, oh yeah, I'm discovering this path because I have someone leading it. It's like, no, actually I have to break the path in and of itself. And there's some people who can give me hints to things, but no one's there in the front. And the thing that becomes important is that almost all of us are path breakers. Yeah. That's the thing that people also forget, is that normally in anything you're doing, in any institution you're working with, like, you are the path breaker. You are the one who creates possibilities for others to follow. And that, I think, that mentality is something that I trace very much in, like, the African Americanness of, like, my culture and history, is that, like, you are part of the struggle. What are you doing? Not for yourself. What are you doing to make it better for the next generations? Because everyone behind you have sacrificed horrors in order for you to be present in the freedom that you are experiencing. So your obligation by birth is to create the conditions of freedom for others who follow behind you.
Look, powerful. And I do think that that's a measure of decolonization. Mm-hmm. Like, to what extent is that message normalized? Mm-hmm. To what extent is that message consistent and, just regularly heard? And I do think that, that it is lacking. It is less of a message, less consistently shared in the Canadian landscape. Mm-hmm. And I think that if we evaluate progress, and if we were to compare, I think we would see some really significant drawbacks to sort of having missed that message in that way. Mm-hmm. I think that because we are cousins to the American context and we are literally physically attached, that we thankfully have, relationship and proximity to it. And I don't want to, so this is not to erase the work and the pains and all the things, the traumas of, historical African descent Canadians, right? And even current people with us now, right? Not to take away from that at all, but I think that narrative that all of you here, everyone listening, that your very purpose is to fight for freedom and to fight for more and to open up the door wider for everyone else. That thing hasn't been as common. And I think we have to, particularly for folks that, they're not social workers or they're not sociologists or they're not, we have to normalize this, or else we won't see collective progress, and your children and your children's children will not see a very different Canada. So I want to pivot a little bit, just to turn attention back to the book, and I have to be conscious of time. But just to say,
we could do this forever.
I know, for real. Forever. Everyone's like, no, we need a coffee break. But you wrote a book about decolonizing design, and obviously you just talked about why you were hired at OCADU, and the very specific title had decolonization in it. But if you could talk a bit, you didn't have to write this book, yeah, right? So that something resonated with you. Why decolonizing design? Why not anti-racist design, for example?
So the way I try to explain it to people is that the structure of the structure of anti-racism, in many ways, it centers, it still centers white folks, right? Because the message is for them to be anti-racist, right? So it's like, and we can have the conversation about whether black folks or whatever be racist or not, but structurally, right, it's still centering. And that's actually, there's a little bit of conversation that's happening in the indigenous community about decolonization in the same sort of way, where it's like decolonization is like, well, actually, that's the project of white folks. Mm-hmm. My project is indigenization, indigenous revitalization. Like decolonization, I didn't set up those structures, mm-hmm, right? White people need to be the ones who tear them down. So, but for me, the important part of like framing decolonization is has to do with that first chapter that I talk about, which is putting Indigenous first. And I'll tell it in a very kind of Torontonian story. So when I came here, everyone was talking about BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and POC. And I was baffled because, again, like, in the context of the United States, Black folks are part of POC. In fact, Black folks are the originators of the term. It was first for women of color when a conference of women, Black women got together, said, these are the things that we need. Everyone else who was racialized looked at it and said, oh, we need those new things as well. So it became women of color, and then expanding gender became POC. So I always like, how is Black folks out of POC when we created the term POC, right? And again, generosity of the community. It's like, oh, let me break down the Canadian context, right? That things are different here. So Indigenous are separate because of their relationship to the land. They are the original custodians of the land. And here they've been fighting for over 500 years, assimilationist policies. Right, so this is the residential schools, right? That was the final tool, right, to force assimilation of Indigenous people. So they're not going to be part of POC because their thing is different, right? And I was like, yeah, that explains that, but I don't understand how Black folks are separate. It's like, oh, well, for Black folks, it's different because, again, they're unassimilatable. Right?
Pause,
That the
pause. We needed a minute. 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay, I know you're about to explain it, so go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the structure of white supremacy requires that Black folks are not assimilated into the state. And what I mean by that is like, yes, we will force you to change your name. My name is Elizabeth Tunstall. Everyone thinks I'm coming from the Queen of England, right? So we will force you to change your name. We will force you to change your language. We will force you to not be able to practice your heritage. We will even ban you from playing the drums so that you have to like put it on your feet, right? We will put all of the structures in place, right, that will force you to not be who you are, but we are still not going to allow you access to education, access to equal representation under the law. We're not going to allow you access to health care. And then we're going to make sure that your only area of overrepresentation is in the prison industrial system, because that's our way of maintaining slavery, right? That's the way of maintaining you as excess labor to work on the lands that we stole from Indigenous people. So Black folks are unassimilatable, which is why we constantly have to say Black Lives Matter, right? So that's a different experience. That's a different experience, right? And it's a different experience for now what we're kind of the POCs, right? So this is in the context of Canada. This includes Latinx, it includes Asian, South Asian, it includes Middle Eastern, it includes everyone who's not Black, not white, not Indigenous, right? And they're coming as immigrants, which is kind of a new form of settler. Now again, they all had to leave their homes because of colonial things going down there, right? But they come here, and depending on their education, depending on their class, depending on the wealth that they had, that they make extremely difficult decisions every single day of like how much they're going to try to assimilate into that system. Do you give your children an Anglo name so that they can have it easier to work in that system? So for me, it was a thing of like understanding, and it only felt that way let's say the nuances are allowed to still exist in Canada in a way that in the US it's like you have to choose really if you're black or white. Even if you're in the middle, you're basically choosing as are you going to be in alliance with blackness or are you going to be in alliance with whiteness? Because that's how strong that system is. But here in Canada, the people are allowed to maintain their identity. So you're making these strategic choices every day, right? So you have to understand where's your positionality?
Yeah.
Who are you in alliance with? Are you in solidarity with? So decolonization is giving back the land to indigenous people. You have to understand what is your positionality in relationship to that struggle, right? So are you on the side of the settlers? Are you building your good life on indigenous land? Or are you in solidarity with indigenous people about dismantling these structures? And the difference is that, like, again, sometimes I feel like the language around DI is like, I just want to join in. I want to be part of the party. I want to get my piece of the pie, right? I want to be there and belong in that system. And again, there's change that happens with belonging because again, the system doesn't want you, right? So by accommodating you, it does have to change. But that's a very different project because decolonization says this system is illegitimate to begin with. That even if I'm part of it, even if I have a high position in it, I am operating in stealth mode because I'm using that to figure out how to dismantle that system. In my case, it's like, how do I bring enough Black and Indigenous people into that system so that it begins to fall apart?
Powerful.
Now, again, not destruction for the sake of destruction, so that they can begin to rebuild it in a form that is actually truly diverse, equitable, and inclusive, right? So you can't, you have to go through a little bit of so let's say, you have to have anti-racism because you have to begin to establish a vocabulary where white folks are willing to give up their power, right? Then you need to have diversity, equity, inclusion because you, unless you have the resources to build an entirely separate system, which again, we've had this debate. It's like, do we build it on our own? Do we join? Do we integrate? Do whatever? And it's, you know, it depends, like how crushing is the oppression. If it's super crushing, we have to build safe spaces for ourselves. If it's open up a little bit, let's use that and begin to sort of dismantle, right? But we do have to, decolonization is different because it says, I'm not sure this institution is legitimate, right? So how do I begin to, and I say it in the context of OCAD, like my project was making it okay for people to live under Indigenous sovereignty. So that they're not afraid of it, because when they're afraid of it, they'll begin to try to dismantle it, right? So how do I make it okay for people to live under the seventh generations, right? How do I make it okay for them to follow these Indigenous principles, you know, of the seven grandfather teachings, so that then when Indigenous sovereignty comes, and it will come, that then they're acting in solidarity and they're not afraid of what that change will be.
I mean, there's nothing else to say. You said it all. It's a perfect note to end on.
No!
I know, and it's so sad. I just want to, you know, the piece around, I do need to circle back just as we close to the piece around African descent people are unassimilatable and why that made me emotional. Several things, right? I was emotional because, first of all, you know, when we hear the truth, that's why we get that resonance. So, you know, when people say ashe or amen, it's because when you hear the truth, right, you just can't. So thank you for speaking that truth. I mourn because the Canadian project is so much about having you think that you can be whoever you can be, African descent, and fully self-actualize. And it is through very painful processes and experiences. And if anyone has followed my story over the last summer, you will know very painful processes and experiences that you come to find out that that is absolutely not so. That there's a ton of lack of safety in this colonial project called Canada, and we really are not assimilatable. And then I'm thinking about the physicality of that: our hair, our skin, right, our bodies, our phenotypes. We are literally unassimilatable, and like physically and sort of conceptually so, right? And I mourn because so few people realize that, and they seek that assimilation, or at least that, that affirmation by whiteness. And they use it as a measure of their own self-worth and success. And I wish for us, if nothing more, that we will free ourselves from that lie. Because you are enough. You are more than enough. And if we really knew who we were and we understood our power, we would understand that we've always been more than this place could ever imagine or handle. So as we close, first of all, I love you so much for your truth-telling, for being a visionary. You came to Toronto, you changed it. You didn't just change OCAD, you changed the city and ultimately the country thereafter. Thank you for this book. It is really a love letter to all of us. And, have a wonderful rest of BLAXPO. Love on you, love on your African descendancy. Find it, cherish it, right? Grow it. And again, thank you to BLAXPO, to Nicole Antoine for the vision.
Thank you.
Have an amazing 2023 BLAXPO. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.